9 teens vanished on a ski trip in 2001. Their orange Snowcat seen one last time, disappearing into a whiteout. For 24 years, not a single trace, until a summer heat wave cracked the glacier open. And what it revealed was perfectly preserved, like time had never moved. But when investigators thawed the Snowcat, they found something inside that didn't belong. A radio still switched on, and a recording no one can explain. Who made that transmission 2 decades after they were gone? Don't look away, like, subscribe, and join us as we uncover what the ice refused to keep buried. It started as a celebration of winter's last weekend, March 2001, the kind that still carried the bite of snow in the Cascades and the restless hope of spring in the valleys below. 9 teenagers from Wenatchee High School Ski Club, all between 17 and 19, signed out the club's orange Snowcat, a tracked utility vehicle meant to ferry equipment and personnel along the Glacier Ridge access road. The plan was simple: an overnight trip to the closed Upper Lodge, where they'd watch the sunset over Mount Baker's icy crown and take photos for their graduation yearbook spread titled The Last Ride. They never came back. The last time anyone saw them was 4:42 p.m., when a Department of Natural Resources camera at the turnoff caught the Snowcat's orange hull glinting in a swirl of sleet. After that, white silence. That night, a storm rolled in fast, 70-mile-per-hour gusts, temperatures plunging below zero. When parents tried to radio them at 8, there was no response. By midnight, 2 pickup trucks from a local volunteer rescue unit headed up the ridge, but drifts already made the trail impassable. By dawn, they found nothing but wind-carved snow. Like, subscribe, and don't look away as we unravel what happened to 9 kids whose bright orange machine was swallowed whole by a mountain, and what the glacier finally gave back 24 years later. In 2001, the Glacier Ridge route was considered safe enough for school clubs early in the season. The access road followed an old fire line, climbing through lodgepole pine to an upper basin just below the Cloudcap Glacier. It was roughly 30 miles from the nearest ranger outpost. The teens, 4 girls, 5 boys, were experienced skiers but not survivalists. The club president, Nathan Gill, 18, had driven the Snowcat before. His co-captain, Lily Tran, 17, handled the radio. They'd planned to reach the lodge by sunset, camp inside, and return the next morning. Investigators later reconstructed their probable route from tire marks found beneath the storm layer. Somewhere after mile marker 17, the tracks veered left toward an old service spur that hadn't been maintained in years. A handwritten sign reading "Closed, Bridge Out" was half buried in snow. That spur led directly toward the glacier's lower field, a place where crevasses and avalanches were common after fresh snow. At 6:07 p.m., a NOAA weather buoy recorded a pressure drop signaling the incoming blizzard. By 6:30, visibility on the ridge was less than 20 feet. Search efforts began within hours. The Sheriff's Department coordinated with Forest Service Rangers and the Air National Guard. Helicopters swept the ridge during short breaks in the storm, their infrared scanners picking up only the heat signatures of elk. Families waited at the fire station, clutching thermoses, hoping for a flare in the night. After 3 days, the storm eased. Searchers found small clues: a lost ski glove near a drift, an energy bar wrapper, a torn map. But no Snowcat, no bodies. Avalanche experts suggested the vehicle could have fallen into a hidden crevasse or been buried under a cornice collapse. The glacier, they said, has a way of keeping its dead. Over the next month, the snowpack deepened by another 6 feet. Any trace of the teens disappeared under solid ice. For years, families returned to the trail each spring, leaving flowers and ribbons at the old turnoff. By 2005, The county declared the 9 officially deceased. The site became something of a local legend, the ridge that ate the Snowcat. Hikers claimed to hear metallic echoes underfoot. In 2012, a memorial plaque was installed at the trailhead in memory of the Glacier Ridge 9. Forever young, forever together. Life moved on, or tried to. Parents aged. Younger siblings grew up. The case file sat in an archive drawer marked C, 1743. Cold case, winter incidents. Then came the summer of 2025. That year, the Pacific Northwest saw a record heat. The Cloudcap Glacier shrank by nearly 80 feet in a single season. Meltwater carved deep blue canyons through ice that hadn't seen air since the Clinton administration. Rangers monitoring the runoff noticed something orange emerging from a moraine wall. First just a corner of metal, then a whole roofline. On August 3rd, a drone survey confirmed it. A Snowcat 275 model, orange hull intact, wedged in a fissure halfway up the glacier's east face. When the recovery team arrived, they found it upright, but encased in clear ice like amber. The club's painted logo, Wenatchee Ski Club, was still visible beneath layers of frost. Inside, through the window, a human silhouette sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel. The extraction took 4 days. Crews used heated water lances and shovels to tunnel through the melt. What emerged stunned even veteran rangers. All 9 passengers were still inside, preserved in near-perfect condition, as if frozen mid-conversation. Oxygen levels within the sealed cab had likely dropped slowly, putting them to sleep before the cold claimed them. The dashboard clock had stopped at 6:41 p.m. Investigators from a National Transportation Safety Board joined glaciologists and the county coroner. Every piece of evidence was photographed before thawing. The Snowcat's radio dial was switched to emergency, though the mic cable was severed, possibly by the windshield frame when it buckled. One headlight still contained trapped air bubbles in the ice, showing it had been on when they went under. The question everyone asked was simple. How did it end up here? Data reconstruction and terrain modeling revealed that in 2001, the spur road ran dangerously close to the glacier surface. The teens, likely disoriented by blowing snow, drove onto the ice field thinking it was still solid ground. Beneath them was a hidden moulin, a vertical shaft where meltwater drains to the glacier's base. When the snowbridge collapsed, the Snowcat dropped nearly 40 feet, sealed by falling snow and refreezing layers within hours. For 24 years, it traveled with the ice, inching downhill at about 6 feet per year until melting exposed it again. The discovery triggered a wave of quiet grief in Wenatchee. Local radio replayed clips from 2001 interviews with parents pleading for information. Schools held a remembrance night. Survivors' families visited the recovered Snowcat, now stored in a temperature-controlled hangar for forensic study. The bodies were eventually released for burial. Most families chose a joint service. At the cemetery overlooking the Columbia River, 9 caskets stood side by side, draped in blue cloth embroidered with snowflakes. Reporters were asked to keep their distance. The sound of melting snow on the church roof echoed faintly through the eulogies. What investigators learned from the vehicle's black box, an optional module on the club's Snowcat, added tragic detail. The altitude readings showed a sudden descent at 6:39 p.m., followed by zero movement. The final recorded note, in pencil on a weather pad inside the glove box, read simply, "Visibility gone. Staying put till morning." They hadn't known the ground beneath them was hollow. Months later, a team from the University of Washington's glaciology lab studied the ice core extracted from the site. Layer analysis confirmed at least 12 annual melt freeze cycles had passed before the first partial thaw in 2013. That meant for over a decade, The Snowcat had been encased in solid ice under immense pressure, a natural time capsule preserving everything from candy wrappers to fingerprints. The finding provided researchers with rare insight into how quickly small alpine glaciers are retreating, and gave families the closure science couldn't measure. In interviews, Ranger Evan Price, who had joined the original 2001 search as a rookie and now led the recovery, described the moment he saw the Snowcat's headlights appear in the ice. It looked like they were still driving, he said quietly, like they'd just taken a wrong turn and kept going through time instead of snow. For local authorities, the case is officially closed. Accidental entrapment caused by glacier subsidence. But for the town, it lingers. Every March, volunteers mark the anniversary with a torchlight ski down the lower ridge. They stop where the spur once turned left, now a rope-off area monitored by sensors, and place 9 small lanterns in the snow. When the wind dies down, the lights flicker in a straight line toward the glacier, as if pointing home. What remains most haunting isn't mystery, but memory. How something as vast as a mountain can keep a promise to return what it took, eventually. When the glacier melted, it didn't just expose metal and bone. It revealed a frozen moment of youth. Half-eaten trail mix, a Polaroid camera, a playlist scribbled on paper labeled Spring Break Mix. Inside the cassette, moisture warped the tape, but one song title was still legible: We'll Be Alright. For years, people asked why they had to go that day, why the school let them, why nature was so quick to silence 9 bright voices. But the mountain doesn't explain itself. It only keeps and releases in its own time. Today, as temperatures keep rising, more of the Cloudcap Glacier collapses each summer. Rangers say other objects, a backpack frame, a ski pole, have begun emerging near the same flow line. Each one feels like another heartbeat coming up through ice, a reminder that nothing buried by snow stays hidden forever. And when you stand there now, on the newly exposed ridge, the air smells faintly of wet iron and pine. The orange Snowcat's paint, faded but visible, sits behind glass at the Cascade Heritage Center, a silent monument to 9 teenagers who went to see the mountain's beauty and became part of its story. Like, subscribe, and don't look away, because the past is still thawing, and sometimes what the ice gives back isn't just an answer, but a warning. When the orange Snowcat was airlifted from the glacier that August morning, the rotors stirred 30 feet of fresh meltwater mist. Families waiting below watched through safety goggles as sunlight refracted off the ice, still clinging to its tracks. For many of them, it was the first tangible proof that the mountain had not lied all these years. Their children had been there, entombed in the glacier's slow heartbeat. The remains were transferred to a refrigerated forensic lab in Bellingham. What followed wasn't a single discovery, but 100 small ones. Items thawing one by one. Ski gloves, notebooks, half-filled film rolls. Every piece a frozen fragment of 2001. Dr. Mara Ellison, the state forensic anthropologist, had spent 20 years identifying avalanche victims. She'd seen bones bleached by snow, climbers frozen upright on peaks. But the preservation here was uncanny. Skin tone, fabric color, even strands of hair retained hue. It's like they were waiting, she whispered to her assistant as the scanner rendered the first facial reconstruction. Each teen was seated where they'd likely been when the Snowcat fell. Nathan Gill in the driver's seat, Lily Tran beside him with a broken mic in her hand, Josh Daniels and Becca Morales in the back bench wrapped in a silver blanket. Every expression carried the same faint, closed-eye calm. On the floor between them lay a disposable camera sealed in frost. When thawed carefully in nitrogen mist, its film yielded 9 images, blurred shots of snowfields, laughing faces, someone throwing a snowball toward the lens. The last frame showed nothing but white static. The flash must have bounced off blinding snow just before impact. For the parents, those pictures became both miracle and torment. They were shown privately, one household at a time, inside the sheriff's conference room. Some families chose to keep copies, others declined. One mother, eyes rimmed red, murmured, "Now I can finally stop wondering which way they were facing when it happened." Investigators pieced together the Snowcat's final trajectory using ground-penetrating radar and drone-assisted LiDAR mapping. They discovered the moulin that swallowed the vehicle had since collapsed into a subglacial cavern, a vertical descent of nearly 45 feet, followed by a gentle slide onto a buried ice shelf. The impact was survivable, but escape impossible. Dr. Ellison's team found no signs of blunt trauma consistent with a violent crash. Instead, oxygen sensors suggested the enclosed cabin gradually lost breathable air. A single window crack served as vent. Frost built up internally. Their flashlights, recovered with uncorroded batteries, were switched off, perhaps to conserve power. It appeared they decided to wait out the storm, unaware that snow layers above them had already sealed every exit. Within 2 hours, carbon dioxide reached lethal levels. The teens likely fell asleep without ever realizing the glacier had taken them. Wenatchee reacted like a body remembering an old wound. Local news stations revisited 20-year-old footage, candlelight vigils, weeping classmates in ski jackets, parents clutching one another outside the high school gym. New anchors were toddlers when the teens vanished. Now they spoke of the case in solemn past tense, as if history itself had thawed. Businesses reopened scrapbooks. A bakery recreated Snowcat cookies, once sold during early fundraisers for the search fund. The radio host who'd covered the story in 2001, Rick Langan, came out of retirement to broadcast a 3-part retrospective. His voice, deeper now, opened the segment. They were kids chasing one last winter, and the mountain kept them. Today, it gives them back. At the memorial service, every pew overflowed. The principal read from the yearbook that never printed. 9 students who carried the brightness of snow into everyone they met. For the first time, all 9 names were spoken in one place without an echo of hope attached. Only gratitude and grief. The glacier itself became an object of national attention. Climate scientists flocked to Cloudcap to study the rate at which it had receded, over a quarter mile since 2001. Dr. Sanjay Patel, a UW glaciologist, described it as a slow-moving archive now entering its final melt cycle. The ice core around the Snowcat contained trapped air bubbles that recorded atmospheric composition from the late 90s, giving researchers rare data on early millennium pollution levels. During one excavation, Patel's graduate student uncovered a strange artifact, a metallic echo from deep within a melt tunnel. It was the Snowcat's rear-view mirror, detached and perfectly reflective despite 2 decades underground. On its surface, mineral layers formed concentric rings like tree growth, each ring marking a year of freeze and thaw. The discovery drew documentary filmmakers. Drones hovered over the glittering melt channels, capturing aerial shots of turquoise pools and black sediment veins. Narrators spoke of time revealing its debts, of a generation frozen under a world now melting from their absence. For a moment, the story transcended tragedy. It became a warning about the accelerating speed of loss. Officially, the county had closed the case as accidental. But not everyone accepted that. Lily Tran's brother, Kevin, now 36, petitioned for an independent review after noticing inconsistencies in the Snowcat's maintenance logs. The vehicle, he claimed, had been reported with faulty brakes weeks before the trip. The school district's paperwork showed the repair order pending. Further digging revealed an email chain between the club's faculty advisor and a district mechanic discussing budget delays. "We can get the parts next month," one message read. The Snowcat was nevertheless cleared for use by a volunteer coach not certified for mechanical inspection. When confronted, the retired coach, now living in Oregon, admitted under oath that he probably shouldn't have signed off, but insisted the teens had begged for one last ride before spring. "They were good kids," he said, voice trembling. "I thought the old cat could handle one more weekend." The revelation reopened an ethical wound. The school board issued a formal apology, though the statute of limitations had long expired. Still, the admission reframed the story. What the Glacier took wasn't just 9 lives. It preserved evidence of adult oversight buried under snow and time. Among the recovered belongings was a Ziploc bag labeled club gear. Inside were folded notes, quick sketches, phone numbers, a torn page from a spiral notebook written in Nathan Gill's handwriting. "If we make it to the lodge before sundown, first round of cocoa's on me. P.S. Someone remind me to call Dad about the spark plug light." The note, dated March 24th, 2001, bore no hint of dread. It was ordinary teenage planning, and that's what made it ache. Ranger Evan Price kept that note pinned to his office board. "Every case teaches you something," he told a journalist. "This one teaches patience and how slow the truth can move." As fall 2025 approached, the families met weekly at the community center to coordinate a permanent memorial. They wanted something beyond plaques, something that would evolve as the glacier receded. The proposal became the Glacier Ridge Interpretive Trail, 9 stone markers leading up the restored path, each embedded with a stainless steel plate engraved with a name, date, and a line from the teens' recovered journals. Becca Morales' quote reads, "Snow makes the world quieter. Maybe that's its way of listening." Josh Daniels' plate says simply, "Save me a seat on the lift." The trail opened in June 2026. On clear days, visitors can still see the faint orange tint of the Snowcat's paint in the distance, protected under a plexiglass dome. School groups visit annually, learning both glaciology and humility. Teachers describe the event as a classroom carved by nature. By 2027, the Cloudcap Glacier had receded another 40 feet, exposing fragments of the old fire road the teens once followed. Lichen now grows on stones that were entombed for centuries. Rangers mark the melt line each month with steel stakes, a moving border between history and disappearance. During one inspection, a ranger spotted something else surfacing, a strip of torn canvas tangled in meltwater. When examined, it turned out to be part of a tent from the 1980s, likely from an old ranger camp predating the teens' trip. Inside its waterproof bag were yellowed photographs of earlier climbers posing with the same mountain skyline. The coincidence reinforced a grim truth. Cloudcap had been claiming lives long before 2001. The mountain, as locals say, remembers in layers. The Snowcat recovery inspired new preservation techniques. Using data from the ice layers, climatologists built a model predicting future melt exposures along the Cascade Spine. The project, funded by the National Science Foundation, aims to locate other possible ice archives containing lost hikers, plane debris, or historical artifacts. Dr. Patel's team installed sensors within the glacier cavity once holding the Snowcat. Each spring, the readings echo a slow heartbeat of temperature and pressure, a living memory of the entrapment site. Patel compares it to listening to a fossil breathe. In 2028, one of his grad students published a paper linking micro-air contaminants inside the Snowcat to early 2000s automotive pollutants, proving that sealed air pockets can retain chemical fingerprints of an era. These kids unknowingly carried a time capsule of our atmosphere, Patel said at a conference. Their tragedy may help us understand how quickly the world around them changed, even in silence. Evan Price, now nearing retirement, returns to the ridge each spring. He carries a thermos of coffee and sits at marker number 3, overlooking the valley. Reporters still ask him if he ever feels the mountain owes him an explanation. He always answers the same. The mountain doesn't owe, it teaches. Every search is a conversation. You ask, it answers in its own language. Sometimes he hears distant cracking, ice calving into melt ponds, and wonders if those sounds might once have been mistaken for rescue signals. He remembers radioing coordinates during the 2001 blizzard, convinced he saw a flicker of orange through the snow. Maybe I did, he tells himself quietly. Maybe it was them waving goodbye. Documentaries, podcasts, and even a streaming series followed. Titles like Frozen Route and The Glacier 9 trended briefly before fading back into the long shelf of true crime fascination. But unlike sensational cases, this one resisted dramatization. There was no villain, no confession, only weather, error, and time. Yet audiences were drawn to the detail that 24 years later, the glacier had kept their faces. It challenged our perception of time itself, that death could remain paused, waiting for sunlight to resume the story. High school students wrote essays about climate grief. Art teachers assigned projects called Melt Memory, where kids carved transparent resin blocks mimicking ice, embedding photos inside. One piece, shaped like a Snowcat window, won a statewide award. In 2030, during routine glacier monitoring, a ranger found a small plastic case near the original recovery site. Inside was a mini cassette labeled Spring Trip. Mix 2. Audio engineers restored fragments of its sound. Laughter, snow crunching, a faint engine hum. Then Lily Tran's voice saying, "Hold on, Nate. Look at that ridge," followed by static. It was their final recorded sound. The clip aired briefly on local radio before families requested it not be circulated further. "That's theirs," Kevin Tran said. "It belongs to the mountain and to us." The station honored the wish. Still, people who'd heard it described it as peaceful, not panic, just curiosity cut short. By the mid-2030s, the Cloudcap Glacier is projected to vanish entirely. Scientists estimate that when it does, it will expose rock untouched since the Ice Age. On that rock, a bronze plaque will remain, reading, "Here, in 2001, 9 young skiers met the mountain. In 2025, the mountain met them again. Between those years, the ice carried their story forward." At lectures, Dr. Patel shows side-by-side photographs of the glacier from 2001 and 2025, one blinding white, the other streaked with blue water lines. The difference between these pictures, he tells audiences, isn't just climate, it's memory melting in real time. For the families, closure came not as an end, but as a cycle. Some moved away, others became advocates for youth wilderness safety. A nonprofit called the Glacier 9 Foundation now funds avalanche awareness programs in high schools across Washington. Their motto, "Respect the mountain, check the weather twice." Nathan Gill's father volunteers each winter, teaching students how to read whiteout conditions. He brings a laminated photo of the recovered Snowcat, pointing to its intact headlights. "You see this? They never turn them off. Hope is the last light to go." 24 years after the recovery, 48 after the disappearance. The melt line sits almost 2 miles higher than where the Snowcat was found. The ridge trail is now mostly rock. Wildflowers sprout where the glacier once lay. The sound of meltwater has become a steady whisper instead of a roar. Tourists often ask rangers why the Snowcat's paint hasn't been restored. The answer, it isn't supposed to shine. It's meant to fade slowly alongside the ice that protected it. Every flake of rust is a calendar. Evan Price explains to them. That's how we remember, not by freezing things perfect, but by letting them age. Each winter solstice, the last rays of sun strike the memorial dome just right, projecting a faint orange glow onto the snowfield. From above, it resembles the shape of a cat's paw, four round prints leading upward toward the ridge. Locals call it the Snowcat's path home. Children who never knew the victims build tiny snow figures near the markers, leaving cocoa packets as offerings. Teachers tell them the story not to scare, but to remind. Nature isn't cruel, it's vast, and sometimes it keeps the things we love safest by hiding them until we're ready to understand. In the end, the Glacier Ridge tragedy isn't about disappearance, it's about endurance. 9 teenagers set out for one last ride and became the mountain's secret. 2 decades later, rising heat wrote them back into history. Between the storm that buried them and the sun that freed them lies a single truth. Time never forgets, it only waits for the thaw. So when you stand at the overlook and the wind whistles through melted ice channels, remember their laughter still circles somewhere in that air. Thinner now, but alive. Like, subscribe, and don't look away, because the stories frozen in silence are still melting into view. When the Cloudcap Glacier finally leveled off in the summer of 2035, it no longer looked like a glacier at all. From the air, it resembled a pale scar running down the Cascades, an exposed backbone of stone and meltwater that glimmered like a split mirror under the June sun. Rangers called it the Ghost Field. To the families of the 9 teenagers who vanished 34 years earlier, it was something else entirely. The last page of a story that had taken a generation to read. Ranger Evan Price, 70 now and close to retirement, parked his service vehicle near the new interpretive center at mile 17. The air smelled of wet granite and wildflowers where snow used to lie shoulder deep. Each time he came here, the landscape seemed a little louder, the hiss of runoff replacing the silence that had once defined a ridge. He carried a single thermos of coffee and an envelope marked Final Report, Cloudcap Retreat 2035. 2 drone engineers waited for him by the overlook railing. They were part of the Cascade cryo-mapping project, charting melt patterns for the state's hydrology office. Mr. Price, good timing, one said. We're getting anomalous readings from below the old Snowcat cavity, something metallic still down there. Price smiled wearily. After all this time, the mountain still has stories. They launched a small drone that dipped into the canyon where the Snowcat had once rested. The live feed showed rivulets carving ice channels through glassy blue. Then a flash, something angular glinting beneath the water, roughly 15 meters down. Patel's replacement, Dr. Rena Voss, a young glaciologist in mirrored goggles, squinted at the monitor. Looks like part of a fuel canister, she said. Maybe auxiliary equipment. Price thought of the old service logs, how the club's advisor had checked spare fuel tank. Yes. If it's metal, we'll get out, he murmured. If it's bone, we'll let it rest. 2 weeks later, recovered fragments arrived at the state forensic lab. Among them, a crushed aluminum cylinder, an ice-corroded digital camera memory card, and a length of woven nylon cord. The card, once dried, yielded 36 images long corrupted by freeze fractals. Technicians ran spectral restoration on each frame. Slowly, ghostly shapes reemerged. Snow ridges, an orange blur, then faces half-masked by goggles. One frame caught attention, a night shot illuminated by flashlight, showing a series of jagged cracks in the snow. A faint reflection, perhaps water, perhaps glass, appeared behind them. The timestamp, 6:38 p.m., 1 minute before the dashboard clock in the Snowcat, had frozen forever. For investigators, that single photo connected decades of speculation. The teens had unknowingly photographed the very fissure that opened beneath them. Their own flash had captured the moment before the fall. By 2035, only 6 of the original parents were alive. Age and time had thinned the gatherings, but their children, brothers, sisters, nieces, carried on the memorial tradition. Every March 24th, they met at the Wenatchee Civic Hall, where a glass display held recovered artifacts. Ski passes, the Snowcat's manufacturer plate, a melted wristwatch permanently stopped at 641. Kevin Tran now chaired the Glacier 9 Foundation. He stood at the podium before a crowd of local students and park employees. My sister once wrote that snow makes the world quieter so it can listen, he began. For years, I thought that was poetic nonsense. But after everything, I realized she was right. The mountain was listening. It just took a while to answer. In the front row, Becca Morales' mother wiped her eyes. Beside her sat Josh Daniels' younger brother, now a firefighter. They had spent months helping sculptors finalize the new memorial for the site, a 9-part installation called the Echo Line. When unveiled, the sculpture resembled 9 translucent panels arranged along the ridge's natural curve. Each panel contained a thin layer of compressed glacier ice preserved under resin. As sunlight passed through, the ice refracted light like blue flame. Within each were embedded small brass tags bearing the names of the lost teens. Scientists estimated that those trapped ice cores would sublimate completely within 50 years, leaving only clear resin, a slow erasure mirroring the glacier's fate. In early July, Dr. Rena Voss returned to Cloudcap with her graduate crew to finish mapping the retreat basin. They carried portable sonar, measuring depth beneath melt ponds. During the second scan, the sonar pinged against a cylindrical void nearly 3 meters long. Intrigued, she lowered a waterproof camera and saw the outline of container. Letters were faint but legible. WDNR, Archive Box 1997. It wasn't from the teens. It predated them by 4 years. Rangers from the 1990s had apparently buried weather instruments at the base of the glacier, sealed in a protective dome. Melt had finally revealed it. When opened days later, the container held notebooks, analog tapes, and an intact barometer. One tape, labeled Field Notes March 99, featured the voice of a ranger describing unstable subglacial cavities near the same area later traveled by the teens. Section F showing signs of hollowing. Recommend closure before spring. That report was never logged in digital archives. Bureaucratic restructuring in 2000 likely misplaced it. If the warning had been heeded, the road might have been closed permanently before the school trip. The revelation reignited debate about institutional responsibility. 2 decades too late for justice, but not too late for accountability. State senators convened a special session that September to address historical negligence in wilderness safety. Price testified, his hands trembling slightly on the microphone. We didn't have drones or satellite mapping then, he said. We had snowshoes, radio static, and faith. Still, someone should have read those field notes. Dr. Voss presented her findings on climate-driven glacier destabilization. Even if the warning had been buried, she noted, the melt rate in 2001 was already accelerating beyond historic averages. Nature's fuse was lit decades earlier. The committee recommended expanded funding for glacial monitoring and established the Giltrans Safety Scholarship in honor of the victims, granting annual stipends to students studying environmental science and emergency management. The motion passed unanimously. For the families, wasn't justice, it was acknowledgement. Late that autumn, Voss invited Price to join her on one final climb to collect the last deep core sample. They hiked at dawn, frost crisp underfoot. The glacier's remnants glittered like shattered glass around them. "This will be the final borehole," she said, setting up equipment near a patch of stubborn blue ice, the only fragment left from the year 2001. As the drill hummed, low vibrations echoed through the hollow beneath. Price knelt, pressing his palm to the surface. It felt cold, yes, but also faintly alive. When the bit broke through, a gust of air hissed upward, air trapped for decades. The smell carried traces of diesel and something faintly sweet like cocoa powder. Voss sealed the core tube. "That's their air," she whispered, "untouched since that night." Price nodded. "Let's make sure it tells the truth." The University of Washington opened a traveling exhibition titled Frozen Voices: The Glacier 9 and the Age of Melting. It combined glaciology with human narrative, interactive holograms of terrain shifts, recovered personal items, and audio interviews with rescuers. Visitors could stand inside a projection tunnel simulating the blizzard conditions of 2001. White noise surrounded them as lines of text appeared on the walls. 6:41 p.m. Visibility 0. Engine stalled. In one corner played a looped quote from Kevin Tran. "We can't stop mountains from melting, but we can stop forgetting." Attendance exceeded expectations. High schoolers left comments on digital tablets, promising safer adventures, better preparation, and respect for changing climates. One entry simply read, "For Lily T, we hear you now." In 2035's final week, Evan Price submitted his retirement papers. His last act as district ranger was to place a sealed envelope into the Cloudcap visitor archive. Inside was a single Polaroid from 2001, showing the rescue team's camp at dawn, the moment before the first helicopter lifted off. On the back he wrote, "Every search leaves something behind. May whoever finds this someday remember we tried." That night, he stayed alone at the Ridge cabin. Snow began falling for the first time in 3 winters, a thin, almost nostalgic dusting. He brewed coffee, opened the window, and listened. The mountain, bare now, made a low groaning sound as ice shifted deep within unseen chambers. To Price, it sounded like a breath drawn slowly through stone. He whispered the 9 names into the dark, then closed the window. On New Year's Day, Dr. Voss reviewed automated recordings from Glacier sensors. At 2:17 a.m., the exact time stamped on the original missing persons radio log. One sensor had emitted a single burst of static followed by a pattern resembling Morse code. SOS. Engineers attributed it to interference from shifting mineral deposits interacting with solar radiation, a natural quirk. Still, the coincidence unsettled them. The data file was archived under anomalous event, retain. When asked about it later, Voss smiled faintly. "Ice moves in frequencies below human hearing," she said. "Sometimes instruments pick up what our ears can't. Vibrations from collapsing caverns, water under pressure. But if you want to believe it was something else, I won't argue." Spring brought field trips back to the site. A new generation of students walked the trail guided by augmented reality headsets, projecting the glacier as it once looked, massive, white, alive. At marker 7, the audio narration was Price's recorded voice. "If you stand very still, you can hear the water running underneath. That's not the past leaving. That's the present learning to move." Children pressed their boots into muddy ground where ice once flowed. One girl asked her teacher if the mountain was sad. The teacher answered softly, "No, it's remembering." Later that year, Kevin Tran released a feature-length documentary titled The Echo in the Ice. It wove interviews, recovered footage, and drone imagery into a quiet meditation on loss and change. Critics called it an elegy in motion. The closing shot showed the 9 resin panels at sunset, glowing amber, while meltwater trickled through them like veins of light. The final narration. Some stories end when the bodies are found. Ours ends when the ice learns to speak. The film won regional awards and was adopted into environmental studies curricula nationwide. Donations to the foundation tripled within months. That winter, Rena Voss published her seminal paper, Subglacial Preservation and the Anthropology of Memory. In it, she argued that glacial entombment offers not only physical preservation, but a metaphor for collective grief. We bury our tragedies in coldness, she wrote, not to forget, but to slow their decay until we are ready to face them. Her data showed that microparticles in the Cloudcap ice still contain traces of the Snowcat's exhaust, carbon signatures matching early 2000s fuel formulations. Even molecules remember, she concluded. Wenatchee reinvented itself as a hub for climate education. The old high school science wing became the Giltran Environmental Center, housing labs, and a memorial atrium. Each freshman class begins with an orientation at the ridge, guided by local rangers. They learn not only about glaciers, but about responsibility, communication, and the thin line between adventure and arrogance. Murals downtown depict the 9 teens ascending into light rather than sinking into snow. Beneath them reads the town's new motto, "The future remembers." During construction of a new trail shelter, workers unearthed a weather-sealed steel tube placed there in 2026 by the families. Inside were letters addressed to those who come after the ice. They were to be opened only once the glacier was completely gone. The mayor organized a public reading on September 9th, 2035. Hundreds gathered at sunset. Each letter was simple, heartfelt. Parents describing their children's laughter, siblings describing what they'd learned from loss. The final letter, written by Price years earlier, ended with, "If the ice is gone, then you're a living proof that memory outlasts mountains. Take care of what still melts." When the reading ended, a hush fell over the crowd. The ridge reflected the last light of day, and somewhere beneath the rock, trapped air escaped with a sighing sound, like applause. By autumn, the state formally redesignated Cloudcap Ridge as a living memory reserve, combining preservation with active research. Tourism funds go directly to scholarship endowments. A live camera stream called the Melt Watch broadcasts daily, documenting how rainfall and vegetation reclaim the valley. Viewers often comment that during dawn fog, the outlines of the glacier seem to return for a moment, blue specters drifting through rock. Scientists call it optical refraction. Locals call it visitation. Each December, the anniversary broadcast plays a single piece of audio, wind passing over the ridge, layered with faint static. The caption reads, "In remembrance of the Glacier 9. Thousands tune in, not for spectacle, but for silence." On December 30th, the first heavy snow in 10 years blanketed the ridge. Dr. Voss returned alone to check sensors now buried under powder. She brushed frost from panel 4, watching how the flakes melted instantly on the warm resin. For the first time, she understood why Price had stayed so long in service. The mountain, even stripped of ice, still felt alive. She wrote in her field journal, "The glacier is gone, but it left its echo, a resonance in people, policy, and air. Every drop of meltwater runs toward memory." She looked up to see the valley below glowing orange from sunset reflected in thousands of thawed pools. It resembled the color of the Snowcat's paint. In March 2036, on the 35th anniversary of the disappearance, a new plaque was unveiled at the overlook. It reads, "The Glacier 9. Nathan Gill, Lily Tran, Becca Morales, Josh Daniels, Rena Keller, Derek Holt, Marcus Reed, Tanya Evans, Eli Stone. They sought the edge of winter and found eternity in ice. May their story remind us that courage and care must walk together. A choir of local students sang, "We'll Be All Right," reconstructed from the recovered cassette's surviving lyrics. Their voices rose over the empty valley, echoing off bare rock like returning birds. Kevin Tran placed a single orange flower on the plaque. "This is the last time we gather here," he told reporters. "The mountain's done talking. Now it's our turn to listen." At dusk, wind swept across the ridge, carrying the sound of distant meltwater. For a moment it seemed rhythmic, 9 pulses evenly spaced. No instruments recorded it, but those who stood there swear they felt it in their chests, a deep vibration that faded as the stars appeared. Maybe it was shifting rock. Maybe it was something else. Either way, it marked an ending, the glacier's final heartbeat, and the world's quiet promise to remember.